The man responsible for calling plays in the Eagles' offense in 2026 just stepped forward publicly in defense of this franchise's quarterback, my friend, and what he said goes directly against everything the media has been writing about the player's future over the last several weeks. Alarming reports, anonymous locker room sources, analyses about hesitation in the deep passing game, absences from voluntary throwing sessions, the wedding the quarterback did not attend. The narrative surrounding Jalen Hurts collapsed in public perception throughout this offseason. But the new Eagles offensive coordinator looked directly at all of that and decided to respond with words chosen carefully and with genuine conviction. So, if you're a true Eagles fan, hit that like button and subscribe right now, because what he said is one of the most revealing moments of this entire offseason in Philadelphia. I'm going to break down who this new offensive coordinator is, what he said specifically about Jalen Hurts during the first phase of OTAs, why those words matter at a moment when multiple anonymous sources painted a very different portrait of the quarterback, what we know about the type of offense he intends to install in Philadelphia, and why the 2026 season is going to be the definitive test that determines whether Hurts is the quarterback of this franchise for the next several years, or whether the most difficult conversation in the Eagles' recent history is going to happen in the next offseason. But first, hit that like and subscribe to the channel because the Eagles never stop making headlines. There is an enormous weight on Jalen Hurts' shoulders right now. Not the weight of the contract, even though that number is suffocating enough on its own. Not the weight of comparison with other quarterbacks around the league. It is the weight of a narrative that was built over 2 years by anonymous sources inside the organization itself, and that culminated this offseason with reports from multiple outlets describing the quarterback as the primary reason the Eagles' offense fell into repetitive and predictable patterns over the last several seasons. Jalen Hurts arrived at the 2026 OTAs carrying more questions about his future than at any other point since he took over as the starting quarterback in Philadelphia. And then Mannion spoke. The Eagles' new offensive coordinator, hired following a stint as quarterback's coach with the Green Bay Packers, sat down with reporters during OTAs on Thursday and made a statement that directly contradicts the dominant tone of everything written about Hurts over the last month. The words Manion chose were not generic, were not corporate public relations protocol, and were not the kind of vague response you give when you are trying to say nothing of substance. He was specific, detailed, and enthusiastic in a way that immediately caught the attention of anyone who has been closely following the Eagles' behind-the-scenes situation. Mannion described Hurts as a player who has done everything right since the very first day of OTAs. He said he believes the quarterback can execute anything the offense asks of him. He cited Hurts' accuracy, his athleticism, and especially his approach to technical fundamentals as the elements that made the last 2 weeks of work genuinely enjoyable from a coaching perspective. But the detail that drew the most attention in Mannion's words was how he described Hurts' attitude in scheme meetings. According to the coordinator, the quarterback arrives every day wanting more. More things to work on, more detail on fundamentals, more depth in his understanding of the scheme. And when he is in meetings, Hurts asks questions that demonstrate real critical thinking, not passive confirmation of what is being taught. Mannion defined that as the hallmark of the players who are the most rewarding to coach over the course of a full season. Now it is important to place those words in the broader context of what is happening in Philadelphia. Manion is stepping into an environment loaded with tension. The ESPN report with multiple anonymous sources close to the roster pointed to Hurts as the primary problem with the offense in the 2025 season. The Athletic's Dianna Russini described the relationship between Hurts and his offensive teammates as functional and professional, words that communicate distance where there was once genuine connection. The quarterback was absent from A.J. Brown's wedding on a weekend that became the public symbol of a rupture that had been building for months. And the voluntary OTAs this week arrived at the same time. The Brown trade to the Patriots is beginning to be described as a matter of days rather than weeks. Mannion knows all of this. He did not arrive in Philadelphia isolated from the locker room headlines. The fact that he chose to speak about Hurts this way, at this moment, in public, is an intentional declaration that the organization is committed to its quarterback, and that the offensive coordinator sees something the anonymous reports cannot capture. What Hurts actually does when he is inside a practice facility, with a new system being installed around him. But there is an additional layer to this story that any honest analysis needs to include. Mannion also said in that same session with reporters that his offense will be in constant evolution and that the central goal is to maximize the strengths of the available players, specifically citing Hurts and Saquon Barkley as the references around whom the scheme will be built. This is relevant because the loudest criticism of the Eagles' offense over the last few seasons was not that Hurts was technically incapable, but that the system around him had become predictable and that the quarterback had settled into limitations that a more aggressive coordinator might have broken through. Mannion comes from the Green Bay Packers, where he spent years watching Jordan Love operate in a system that demands quick decision-making processes, confidence in tight windows, and the willingness to make difficult throws in high-stakes moments. That is exactly the kind of offensive vocabulary that the Eagles' anonymous sources indicated was missing from Hurts' game in the 2025 season. If Manion can successfully install that mentality in Philadelphia, the argument that the quarterback was limited by the system rather than by his talent gains significantly more weight. If Hurts continues to hesitate even with a new coordinator and a new system built around him, the conversation changes completely. And that conversation has a very specific number attached to it. Hurts signed a 5-year extension potentially worth up to $255 million, with $179.3 million guaranteed back in 2023. That is the contract that defines Hurts' position as the franchise quarterback through at least 2027. But reporters and even league executives have been pointing out in recent months that the Eagles could theoretically exit that deal in the next offseason if the 2026 season does not meet expectations. That would not be a simple process, financially or emotionally, for a city that watched Hurts lead the team to a Super Bowl as a starter. But the fact that this conversation exists publicly is, by itself, the most accurate thermometer of the pressure currently sitting on the quarterback. Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman have not made public statements about Hurts' future beyond the franchise's standard support. But the offseason moves tell a different story. The draft focused on receivers, the addition of Mannion as offensive coordinator with an implicit mandate to modernize the attack, the A.J. Brown departure being processed, without any public display of resistance from the organization. These are the actions of a franchise building a system that will function with or without the pieces that defined Hurts' offense over the last several years. And if the offense functions at an excellent level without Brown alongside Hurts, the quarterback will have proven the critics wrong. If the offense remains limited even with a new coordinator and a renewed receiver group, the organization will have enough information to make one of the most consequential decisions in its recent history in the following offseason. Mannion said Hurts has been awesome, that he can do anything the offense asks, that he is accurate, athletic, detail-oriented, and hungry for more. These are the words of a coordinator who genuinely believes in the player he is going to call plays for in 2026. And now, the entire NFL is going to watch to see whether the field confirms what the practice facility is suggesting. Do you believe what Mannion is seeing? Or do the anonymous reports from sources inside the locker room itself tell more about the reality of Jalen Hurts than any public statement from the coaching staff can reveal? Does Jalen Hurts have the 2026 season that silences the critics and confirms he is the quarterback of this franchise for years to come? Or is the most difficult conversation of the 2027 offseason already being prepared behind the scenes in Philadelphia? Leave your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe to the channel. I'll be back later with the latest Eagles news.